I'm excited to have Shannon McClintock Miller here for our closing keynote. Shannon is married to Eric and a mom of 3 children. She is a teacher librarian and a technology integration specialist. She was the K-12 district teacher librarian at Van Meter Community School District for 8 years. Shannon now speaks and consults around the world on education, librarianship, technology, social media, and making a difference in education and the lives of others. Currently, Shannon is working on a series of children's books with Cantana Learning and a professional book focused on being the change within the school library and education. Shannon is the author of award-winning The Library Voice blog and enjoys writing for various blogs, journals, and other forums. In 2014, she was named a Library Journal Mover and Shaker. Please welcome Shannon McClintock Miller.
Okay, is everybody having a good day today? Yes. You guys have been busy all day. I've been kind of keeping track, so I can't wait to go back and look at everything too. So I'm super excited. Thanks for the nice introduction, but I'm always excited to talk to my friends and to my colleagues in Iowa. So I'm excited today to talk to you and end your day talking about student voice. And this is a story of mine as I was the teacher at Van Meter, but also just a story of me as a person and as an educator, and most of all, just me listening to kids and what they need, and that's what you've been doing all day. And so a little bit of background about myself. I am from Iowa. I grew up on a farm in Shellsburg, Iowa, in eastern Iowa. And when I was growing up, my mom always instilled in my sister and I just to be as creative and boisterous as we wanted to be. And we were really lucky because we had that upbringing, not just in outside, but in our house too. And we're always surrounded by great experiences and lots of books and lots of educational experiences too. And so we were really lucky. And my mom said that even from the time I was little, I always liked to communicate. I always liked to talk. And so she made sure that my sister and I and my brother always had a voice, not just at home, but also in our education. And so when I graduated from Shellsburg, I went on to school, and I first went to Iowa State, and I majored in graphic design. And then I went on to UNI, and I majored in elementary ed. And when I graduated from undergrad school, I stayed home with my 3 kids for 13 years, which was the best job in the world. And then in our community in Van Meter, the library job came open. But first, there were 2 other jobs that I applied for. I applied for the art job in the elementary, and I didn't get it, and I was devastated. And then I applied for a 5th grade job, and I didn't get that either. And so I thought, I'm just going to keep staying home with my kids. I'm totally happy. And then the library job came open, and John Carver, who was the principal at the time, came to me and said, this would be perfect. You love technology, you love working with the kids, you come and volunteer at the library, and the kids absolutely love it when you do. And what they were trying to do at Van Meter was they were trying to change education and change the way that things were done. And so I applied for the job, and I got hired. And all along, I was empowered to do great things and to try different things and definitely to follow my passions. And the thing that I loved is that they empowered all of us to have a voice in transforming learning and changing education. And that's what we were going to do at Van Meter. And so I want you to think about your learning. You've been here now for the whole day learning. And how do you feel when you are asked how you want to learn and what you think is important? Think about that. And then I want you to think about this. What would happen if you asked your kids what is important to you? When was the last time that you asked your students that? So I'm going to start with a story about my friend Meriden. And at the time, Meriden was in 4th grade. And Meriden was the kid who just loved doing things, always engaged in her education, loved how we were putting technology into the hands of the kids, and loved to do different things. And so we had this opportunity in Iowa, and I'm sure that some of you have heard of it or participated before. And it was started by 2 boys, Ian and Jack. And Ian is from he graduated last year from Waukee, and Jack is from Bettendorf. And these 2 boys started the Iowa Student Learning Institute a few years ago. And so it was great because we had the opportunity to bring any of our kids that we wanted to. And so I asked the kids, and Meriden was one of them that wanted to come. And she was one of the youngest ones by far at the conference on that Saturday. But I watched her, and I watched how excited she was to take pictures and to tweet and to ask questions and to share what she was learning with all the other 400 kids there. But I also invited my friend Jennifer, and I invited her daughter Jackie. And Jackie was the kid that we've all had that you just can't get engaged in things, and she was in junior high, and all she liked was gaming and to stay in her room. And I said, Jennifer, I think this would be really great for her to come. And so she came. She wasn't very happy. She didn't really talk to me before. But after the keynote, everybody else left, and I looked over, and I could tell they were on their screens. And so I went over, and she had the biggest smile on her face. And I said, what's going on? And she's like, I'm so excited because Meriden helped me make a blog during the keynote, and I'm already written a post. And this is like in an hour-long keynote. And so this girl who wasn't excited about education before came out of her shell and was completely excited. And this all happened within an hour during this keynote at a conference. And so it was great to look back on that and kind of reflect. And the next day, Jennifer wrote me this tweet. And we all love tweets like this and our messages. And it said, thank you so much for inviting us today. I feel like knowing you will change my life and Jackie's too. We've all had messages like that. We're teachers. But think about who made the difference that day. It wasn't me. I just invited them. It was another student. And it was a student that was much younger than her, but because we gave them the chance to get together and to learn together and to talk, they made a difference in each other's lives. And I think Lisa said it perfectly, and this is Meriden's mom. She said she is definitely with her people today. And so after that, I was getting ready for a keynote that was online, and I wanted it to be about student voice. And so I went to Meriden and I said, I would love for you to help me present. So I'm telling her everything we're going to present about, and Meriden said, why are you telling me what we're going to present about? Like, I'm the kid. I should be telling you what we're going to present about. And so we sent, and she had this idea. She said, let's make a survey. Let's send it out. So we sent it out to all the kids at Van Meter. Then we sent it to people on Twitter, to the listserv, and we got back thousands of responses from all over the world. And these are the things that the kids said that they really want from us. They want us to let us be connected, to let us have experiences, to let us create, let us collaborate, let us have access, let us make a difference. And almost every one of them said that they're not heard and they want to have a voice. And so we're going to start with let us be connected. And I know that you've probably been talking a lot today about being connected. You're talking about digital citizenship. And this is the story of not just me getting connected with my kids, but also my kids getting connected with other kids and me getting connected with other kids and other teachers too. And when I started, the first thing for me was just those relationships in person. That's the most important thing for us as teachers, is what we can do in our classrooms and our libraries. But after about a year, we started to get connected on Twitter. And we got connected as a team. My administrative team, my superintendent and principal, and my curriculum director, we all got on Twitter together. And we started tweeting, and we started looking for other schools to connect with as well. And the first connection that we made was with a school in Merton, Wisconsin. And it was the same thing. It was another superintendent and principal and the librarian. And we decided to make the connection just really simple. We were going to just read a book on Skype. And it was going to be with 2 classes. And so I had to choose a teacher from my school. And I went to my cousin Krista, who teaches kindergarten at Van Meter, and I told her what we were going to do. And Krista was not excited about what was going to happen. And she was comfortable with the way that she had always done things, which I totally understand. But I was very patient and very excited, and I just kept going to her and saying, this is going to be a great experience. And so on that day that we Skyped, I went to her classroom, and she wasn't prepared for what we were going to do. But the fun thing is I said, let's just use my computer, and we'll pull up a chair, and I grabbed that giant Tupperware container, and I put my computer on the top. It didn't have to be this big, huge production. And we Skyped from Van Meter into Merton, Wisconsin. And my son was in the class at the time, and Hagen absolutely loved it. He loved reading with his new friends, and we went to the library, and we created their own little wild selves using a digital tool, and we put it together in an ebook, and they actually got to take that link home and show their parents the ebook they made, not just with their friends at Van Meter, but with their friends in Merton, Wisconsin. Think about what these 5-year-olds, what that meant to them that day. But after school, Hagen came up, and I had this book that had a map in it. And Hagen said, Mom, this is where I live in Iowa, and my new friends live here in Wisconsin. And he understood what that meant. And I knew that after that, it was going to make a huge difference. And so we started talking about it. I started blogging from the Library Voice. I started talking about it at school. And the kids started listening. And I want you to hear what they first heard and what they thought about this.
She came up with a new name for our library. It's called Voice. It's so that everyone can be heard inside the school, outside the school, and at home, and in the library. So she showed me this website. It's called voice.com, and there's a blog, and then there's a Facebook page about it, and there's a Wordle, and she showed me all these new cool things about it. Then I was on the page just scrolling around, looking around, surfing it, and there was a link called Author of the Week, and so I was really curious to see what that was about, and so I clicked on it, and I saw Amy Efaw's name, and she was writing a book called After, and Mrs. Miller was reading that, and that's what she told me she was reading. So then I was like, okay, I want to read this. So I read it, okay, and then I started talking to Amy Efaw, which was really cool, because I've never really got to talk to an author before, and so I felt very lucky that an author was talking to me. And one day I was homesick. I did a video conference with Amy Efaw, and we talked about her book, and she answered questions that I asked, and it was so cool. It was like probably the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. And now there's a website called pointsofview.com, and you can go on there and you can check to see when the next blog is going to be or when the next video conference is going to be. And I thought I was a really lucky person to be able to experience this. Thank you so much.
So what happened was, and you kind of heard this, was I was in my library and the phone rang, and it was Maddie, and she said, Mrs. Miller, this is Maddie Dara. And I'm like, yeah, and she's like, I'm homesick today, but I just talked to Amy Efaw. And I'm like, you mean like the author, Amy Efaw? And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was really excited, but also I was really nervous because I was like, what is this going to mean for our kids when we're putting all these things into their hands, into their minds, into the spaces that they're at? What is this connection going to mean to our kids? But we took it and we embraced it, and we talked about it even more to our kids, about being safe, about being connected, about finding these connections. And a couple weeks after this, something else happened in our school, and this happened all really fast. And I got an email from an organization called the Shorty Awards. And they said, we would love for you to come to New York City. You've been nominated for a Shorty Award. Has anybody heard of Shorty Awards? Either had I. Oh, maybe a little bit. And this was when, remember, the year before, I was a stay-at-home mom. And so I had hardly traveled. I never would have been up here talking in front of you. That would have scared me to death. And they wanted me to come to Times Square. And they wouldn't tell me, though, who had nominated me. And they said, all we can say is it for being connected. And so I didn't go, and we actually had a little tornado come through our yard the week before, so I kind of use that as an excuse. And I watched, though, from Van Meter, Iowa, out in the country with my family. And so I'm going to play this for you now, and if you think that from being from Iowa means that you can't be connected to the world, this is definitely going to change your mind. Whoops.
All right, social media gives individuals the power to make a meaningful impact in their communities, and for the first time, we're presenting a Connecting People Shorty Award. It's created in partnership with Nokia, and it's given to a person who is genuinely bringing people together through the use of Twitter and social media with help from, by the way, Nokia Connects hashtag. The tweeting people told us, using that hashtag, who they think is making a big difference. And those are your nominees. The Connecting People Shorty Award goes to Shannon Miller.
So my kids and I are
And
like,
as you see, the competition there was pretty good, so congratulations to Shannon. Shannon is a librarian, a teacher, and a technology specialist in Van Meter, Iowa. Now, one of the voters wrote this about Shannon. Quote, she connected me to my favorite author, Amy Efaw, who I now have on Facebook and talk to her often. I'm only 14. She's changed my life. Now, Shannon couldn't be here tonight because her home was recently damaged in a tornado.
I was mortified.
Not to worry, she says her family is fine, but in her words, things have been a little nutty while they clean up. So she sent us this video.
And I look really scared in this video, too.
Thank you for following me as I globally connect students and teachers every day to their passions, others, and most importantly, to their voice.
So I end up like watching that whole thing. I get off and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I call Maddie and her family. I'm like, Maddie. And she goes, you don't know how you're changing our lives. You don't know the things that you're doing, how much that's changing our life. And you're opening up the world to us in Van Meter, Iowa. And we all get it. We're from Iowa. But on that day, the cool thing was, and I don't know if you noticed the other people, but one of them was like Neil Gaiman's wife. One of them was a rapper. But a teacher in Iowa got the award. And the cool thing is the next day, this was on their page, but in the USA Today and the Examiner, they didn't even mention me my name. It was just everyone from Conan O'Brien to a librarian in Iowa. That was the big news for them, was that it was a librarian from Iowa, and that was the news that got it. But I love that because that's the truth, and we can all make a difference because we're teachers. And that's the difference that it made, not just for me that day, but the change that it brought to our community and to our school, and especially to our kids, was huge. And so these changes just kept happening. And one of the neatest ones that happened a few months later is my friend Bill Brannick and I, who I met at ISTE one year, we decided that even because he lived in Philly and I lived in Iowa, why couldn't we teach a class to our kids? And it was called the Connect, the Student PLN Connect. We called it the Connected PLN for our kids. And we taught them all these things. We taught them about being good digital citizens, and we taught them about digital citizenship and their own PLN, and they built their PLN. The great thing about this was these were our older ones, and it helped us because we were a K-12 school really look at that for our younger ones and all of our kids too, and it made us better teachers as well. And so we taught that way all year long, and we used Skype and we connected, and it was great because my daughter was in the class and I'd go in her room at nighttime and she'd be doing her homework like on her computer with her friends from Philadelphia. But we can do that because we're connected. And I went there too to Philly, and it was just like I had had these kids and known them my whole life, just like my kids in Van Meter, Iowa. One of my greatest stories about being connected and getting kids connected is a lot of them would like to come to the library and really kind of push me on who they thought we could get connected with. And so these boys came in one day and they said, well, we bet that you can't connect with the creator of Halo. And I'm like, I really don't even know what Halo is, but we could like ask on Twitter. And so we sent a tweet out, and sure enough, within minutes, Alan Murray, who's the creator of Halo, wrote us and said, have your kids bring in Halo tomorrow to the library and we'll play together. And so think about what that meant to the kids and how it was so neat for them to see that they could connect with anybody in the world. And just to catch you up with Krista and what's going on with her, a few years after that, we connected with Mercer Mayer. And Mercer Mayer, as you all know, does Little Critter. And he is just a great author and illustrator. But Krista came to me, and she really wanted to connect with Mercer. And it was so neat because she had this vision in her head that they would do that and connect during their unit on Mercer Mayer. So I reached out to him, and they made a book, and we didn't hear anything from Mercer. And about 4 months later, Mercer wrote on my Facebook wall, and he said, I would love to connect with your kids. And so we Skyped with him, and look at what it means to the kids. It means everything to them to be able to Skype with somebody like Mercer Mayer. But the cool thing is that it means everything to these people too. And you can see that in Mercer's face, and you can see it on his Facebook wall and what he sent out on Twitter. And this is the thing, don't be afraid to connect with anybody on Twitter or anyone that you can reach out to, because people are out there to connect with all of us too. And it means the world to the kids. The next thing is to let us collaborate. And the kids, they were constantly collaborating. And because we had so much technology, our collaboration was changing too. Our rooms were changing, our spaces were changing. We were putting things into their hands that made their learning very mobile. And this was really fun to see that collaboration change too, because it was happening not just within our school, but also online with other people and other classrooms and other authors. And you've heard lots of stories already about this. And one of our favorite people to collaborate with was Tom Engelberger, who was the Origami Yoda author. And Tom, I'm sure that some of you know, is those books are super famous to kids and they absolutely love them. But the cool thing are a lot of these people also became teachers and mentors to my kids. And so when we would connect with Tom and others, they would not just Skype with them, but they would even do activities and writing. So think outside of the box when you're connecting with people, how they can also be teachers to your kids and really make that stick what they're teaching. There's also a lot of things that we don't know as teachers, and coding was one of those things that I had no clue how to teach, and I had no clue myself what coding even really meant. But I had the chance to reach out and connect with lots of different companies that did coding with kids. And so I reached out the time that we were trying to teach our kids coding, and we were doing this K-12, to companies like BotLogic. And I would have them Skype in, and I would have them teach my kids, but not just through that collaboration teach them, they were also teaching me and teaching the other teachers. And so those collaborations mean a lot to you as well. And we can't forget the collaborations too with like our public spaces and with our kids, with our parents when they go home. And this is a great story because this is Meriden. And Meriden, shortly before we had that conference, and you heard all about Meriden in the beginning, she was featured in the ISTE blog because she's been blogging since she was 9. And ISTE featured her as one of the students, and it was an interview that they did with her parents that really made me think about how much we empower our kids then to go home and collaborate with their parents too, and how much they're teaching them. And so we need to instill these things in them as well and have opportunities for our parents too. The next thing is to let us create. And this is one of my favorite things, being an artist and being an art educator. And we always had creating going on. But because the kids were connected and because they had the technology in their hands and these tools, and also the license to be able to do it, we had a lot of different opportunities when it came to them being creative. And this was a story about a boy named Aaron, and Aaron wanted to connect with the author of the I Spy books. So I reached out to her and she said she would love to, but she said, first your kids have to make their own I Spy book. And so they took their iPads and they brought their own materials to school and they wrote their little verses with their teachers in their class, and we put it all together in an ebook. And so we sent it to her and she was so excited to be able to Skype with the kids. But afterwards, because of all this creation they had done, the kids came to me and they said, we're making all these projects, but they're all online. There's nothing anymore that we can like touch. And some things you could print off, but they hated that because they wanted that book to be part of the collection. Well, I started looking at it different, and for those of you who are librarians, or even if you're not, take this idea back to your librarian, we started cataloging student work. And so when the kids would look up, like say, Iowa animals, they'd find the kindergarten book that the kindergartners made, or the I Spy book. They found that I Spy book then not just on the shelf, but also online. And so that creativity now was being pushed out too, digitally in different ways. Hagen, when he was in 2nd grade, he loved Minecraft, like all of our kids do. And Minecraft was completely blocked at school, but it was open on our iPads, the teachers' iPads. So Hagen took Little Bighorn Battlefield and he reproduced it on my iPad in Minecraft. And he did this because he wanted it to be unblocked at Van Meter. He wanted that to have access for all of the kids. And so our kids were really powerful when it came to their own ideas as well. And I love this idea from our high school kids. And our high school kids, this was several years ago, wanted to start a news channel. And they wanted to be in charge of it themselves. They wanted to be empowered to have this news channel that was their very own, that they could have every week. And they were so creative about it, and it was a huge success, but it was because we let them be creative, and that's why it all happened. The next thing is to let kids have experiences, and we're lucky now because there are lots of experiences online. Today, or this week, is actually Dot Day. Is anybody gonna do Dot Day this week? Have you heard of it? It's such a fun thing for kids to experience, and one of my favorite is World Read Aloud Day. And like I said, we have these things all year long now that we can, no matter what we teach, no matter where we are in the school, that we can have our kids participate in. And World Read Aloud Day started out for us just kids reading, and we were reading back and forth in classes. And it turned out to be that we made dozens of connections all through the week for World Read Aloud Day. And I made up this document earlier in the summer, and you can go here. I'll share the link with you afterwards to the presentation. And these are things that are happening every month and that are either online or that you can do in person and face-to-face. But there's no excuse for kids not having these great experiences now because they're out there, and these are all free for us to do with our kids. Now, one of my favorite experiences was when we had a celebration for Happy Pig Day. And we were celebrating Mo Williams' new book. And I used to think to myself, like, we're doing all these great experiences, and we're celebrating Dot Day and World Read Aloud Day. But because we're in Van Meter, Iowa, I used to think we don't really have a lot of diversity. Like, I think we'll just get things from everybody else. And then I started thinking, and this is the second year that I was connecting, I started to think about it a little different because my friend John Shu, who was a librarian outside of Chicago, who we taught together almost every day online with our kids for almost 3 years. And one day John said, you know, we're getting ready for that celebration, and you live in Iowa, and aren't there some pigs around there? And so I'm like, that's a really good idea. I know a family that has a pet pig. And so I reached out to them, and they brought Bacon, the pet pig, to the library. And John and I Skyped, and we made cookies, and we read, and we celebrated. But think about when his kids on the computer being held up. Think about what they thought outside of Chicago, these kids that a lot of them have never even been to a farm, to see that they had a pig in the library. And that was something that my kids could share, that those kids in Chicago couldn't share. And so I started thinking about that different. All the things that we have in Iowa, all the things that your kids have and your parents have and you have, think about all those things special that you have to share with the world too. The next thing is to let us have access, and this goes along with all the great resources that we have now. And because we have technology, of course, our resources are changing. We have databases and ebooks and audiobooks and access to the internet. Anything that the kids want is at their fingertips. And we used a platform, and I'm sure a lot of you do, called Mac and Via. And this changed our library and our school because we were able to get to our resources so easily. And it became a platform not just at school, but also at home. And they had these resources with them anywhere they went, which was a really powerful thing for our kids. One of the things that I love that we gave our kids access to, and we did a lot of things with Facebook and a lot of things with Twitter, but when we started an Instagram, this was something that I could have the kids really help me with. And so we started an Instagram, and we called everything the Van Meter Library Voice, and I put it on an iPad. And I had the iPad on a tripod in the library, and I taught the kids how to take pictures and how to post them on our Instagram. And so they would come, and they could, anytime they want, they could come and get it and take pictures of what was happening in the library and the school. And so at the end of the year, think about this great album that we had that was through the eyes of our kids. But we not only had a great album, we taught the kids how to use social media and how to really have not only access to it, but to use it appropriately, because most of our kids, even our elementary kids, were on Instagram. And I love this picture because Eve was in 2nd grade at the time, and we were celebrating Dot Day, and she hopped up on the table and took a picture because she wanted to share it. And so even if it was a picture, we were giving them access to these things that they definitely had access to in other times of the day, not just at school. The next thing is to let us make a difference, and this is one of my favorite stories to tell, and this is a story about my son Hagen, and he was in 3rd grade. And Hagen came home and he said, Mom, they're gonna ban rainbow balloon bracelets. And I'm sure you guys have all seen these. And I'm like, why are they banning them? And he said, well, we're throwing them and trading them and they're really becoming distracted in school. And so I said, well, Hags, you have to do something different or they're all gonna be taken away. And so the next day, Hagen and his friends came to me and they said, we want you to help us and we have an idea. We could do a PBL project over the banding or over the rainbow balloon bracelets. So I said, that is a really great idea. And so we all got together, and these are 3rd graders, and the kids decided to call it Banding Together. And so we started to research, and they got into groups, and they made plans for what they were going to research and what they were going to focus on. And we dove into the inquiry model, and we Skyped with EasyBib and learned how to make citations, anything we could to make this project as rich as it could be. And I have never seen this group of kids so excited about anything they had done in their lives. But they had a mission. They did not want those bracelets to get taken away. And so soon it turned into something else though. And they saw that everybody else was seeing them also create these bracelets. And so kids all over our school and in different places in our town were bringing in bracelets that they were creating. And so I was writing about it and I was putting on Twitter and Facebook and on my blog, and people like the Rainbow Balloon Company and other schools, they started to tweet about what these 3rd graders were doing in Van Meter. Well, of course, we had thousands of bracelets, and so we started talking about what were we going to do with these bracelets. And one of my friends, Mark, who used to be the superintendent in that first school we connected with in Merton, Wisconsin, he's now a missionary in Africa. And Mark reached out to me and he said, Shannon, I would love for you to send those bracelets to these kids in Africa. I'm like, that is a great idea. That's what we'll do. And the kids love the idea too. Well, another company, a publishing group in New York, In This Together Media, saw the story as well. And they reached out to my kids and we Skyped with them, and they had a place in India. And Syra, who's one of the owners of In This Together Media, her aunt is a nun there. And she said this would be a great place too to send the bracelets to. So the kids agreed and they were so excited. And a few days later, In This Together Media reached out to the kids again. And they said, we love what you're doing so much, we want to start a foundation with you. And so they started banding together. And they worked with a graphic designer, and they started a Tumblr page and a Facebook page. And they started to talk about this and promote what they were doing all over the world. Well, any ideas what was happening when everybody else was seeing all the charms and all the fun that they were having? Any guesses? Schools all over the world started sending us their bracelets. And so thousands and millions of bracelets came to Van Meter. And I would be at conferences and I would be different places, and people would bring up these huge boxes of bracelets for Hagen and his friends to send to these places because they loved what they were doing. They loved their mission. And so the kids worked with authors and they made charms for them, and they got them all ready to send to Africa and India for their first batch. And it wasn't until they got the letters back from those kids that they really truly understood the difference they were going to make. Because as you can see, these are from the orphanage in India, where the kids have absolutely nothing. And they are in the poorest conditions than we can even imagine. But these kids wrote letters with markers, and they drew pictures, and they didn't tell my kids about the conditions they lived in. They just talked about them. And so think about what that meant to Hagen. And it all started out because we let him have a voice, and we listened to the difference these kids could make. And so the last thing I want to say, and I'll catch you up with Hagen in a minute too, is just to talk about student voice. And I have 3 stories. The first one is Gunnar. And Gunnar was in kindergarten at the time. And Gunnar was the kid that we've all had who he is just cute as can be, but I just could not connect with him for anything. And I would show him things. I would try to be funny. I would try to talk to him, anything I could in the library, and I just could not connect with him. And when we were getting ready to do our Iowa Animal PBL project with our kindergartners, we thought it would be really fun to kick it off with the author Seymour Simon, who is a dear friend of mine. And Seymour used to be a science teacher, and he's wonderful with kids, and he talked to every one of the kids about their essential questions. Well, Gunnar got up to the computer, and he was all mad, and he had his little arms crossed. And so Seymour said, well, what's wrong? He never even asked him what his animal was. And he said, I have an Iowa snake, and I don't want to do an Iowa snake. And so Seymour said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, I really want to do the woolly mammoth. So Seymour said, why can't you do the woolly mammoth? And he whipped around, and he said, well, my teacher won't let me. And so his poor kindergarten teacher stood there, and we all said, just let him do the woolly mammoth. And he turned back around, and he was so happy, and he said, I promise I will prove the woolly mammoth walked across Iowa. And so we saw Gunnar come out of his shell. We saw him bring things to school, and we saw him excited. And even though he doesn't look too excited here, he really was excited. And he was so happy because he got to stand up that day, and he got to tell us that he proved the woolly mammoth did not walk across Iowa. But think about how happy he was and how excited he was about his learning. And that turned something for Gunnar that day. Even though he was in kindergarten, we let him have a voice, and that made a difference. And so to catch you up with Hagen, Hagen now is in 6th grade, and the Banding Together project has changed a little bit. It is something now that is taken care of by a group called Be a Noble Kid, because it got to be so big, and there were like so many bracelets, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with all these bracelets. And so they contacted us, and Hagen and his friends, and they asked if they would help them develop a curriculum and to have this be part of their website. And so you can go there now, and you can see all about Banding Together too. This is totally free, a great way to get your kids connected. It doesn't have to be bracelets. I mean, rainbow balloon bracelets aren't really a thing anymore. It can be a letter, it can be a bookmark, it can be something that maybe they make that's special. But the big thing is having your kids be connected. And Hagen and his friends, I had the chance to go to Mexico earlier in the year with my husband, and he works with Capstone Publishing. And Capstone, they have a village in Mexico where they sponsor, and so they've built a school, and they've built a library, and they give books every year. And so I thought this would be a really great place, because I've been watching all the stories that have been shared on our Banding Together Facebook page from all over the world about different people bringing things to villages or to places where kids really need things. And so I took some bracelets when we went to the village in Mexico, and I took them in a container, and my sister is the librarian in Amana, Iowa. And her kids always make them, and she puts them in like the peanut butter containers from school that she gets from the lunch ladies, but they make these great Banding Together containers. And so I took one with me, and that's what I was giving the bracelets out in. Well, this little girl, she wanted those bracelets so bad, and I thought she was being like greedy, and she wanted to be in control, and she had them all on her wrist, and she was so excited, and she couldn't wait for that container to be empty. Well, when the container was empty, she asked me if she could have it, even though her and I didn't understand anything that the other was saying. And she ran off. And about 5 minutes later, she came back, and the container was filled up with water with the lid on, and she had her little sister. And they both gave me a hug and a kiss, and they ran off into the forest. Well, they wanted that container because they wanted a container for water, because their family has nothing. And so, of course, I'm sitting there crying, but to go back home and to tell Hagen and his friends and to show them these pictures, they all knew that they made a difference because we let them have a voice. And the last story I want to tell you is my friend Luke. And Luke, I'm so proud of him because he graduated this year. And when Luke was a sophomore, we got a 3D printer, and I wrote a grant to Donors Choose, and we got funded right away, and I had no idea how to use it. I just thought it'd be really cool to have at our school. And so I started talking about it, and Luke heard that we were getting a printer. Well, he came to me, and he met me in the hallway, and when Luke would see me before at school, all he would do was sing. He's autistic. And so that was his way of talking to all of us. And he would see me, and I was the library girl, and our superintendent was the bald guy, and he was this great kid and this great voice, but that was his way of communicating with all of us because Luke loves to sing. Well, on the day that he found out about the printer, Luke found me, and he said, Shannon, I hear we're getting a MakerBot. And I just stood there completely shocked because here Luke had a voice, and he was an expert in 3D printing. And so he asked me every day, like a million times, when the printer was coming. And on the day the printer came, I said, let Luke bring it in, like let him be in charge of it. So he comes in, and I'm teaching some elementary kids, and he said, can I open it? Can I open it? And I wanted to be like, no, be careful. And I said, yeah, go ahead and open it. And within minutes, he had schools, or students and teachers, and he would grab parents, anybody he could, to show them the printer. And he was printing things like mummy cases and sharks and skeletons and all kinds of fun things. But to see this, and to see this kid who just a week before was somebody that we saw who maybe didn't have a voice or didn't feel like he had a voice, and all of a sudden Luke was the expert in our school on 3D printing, and he had a voice. And my days at the library, they used to be like to 5:30. Now they were to 6:30, 7, because Luke wanted to stay at school. And he wanted to start a channel called Build with Luke. And so I just want to show you just a tiny little clip of Luke so you can hear his passion.
Hi, my name is Luke Nestian, and I am a 10th grader here at Van Meter High School. We just got this new 3D printer here in the library, and so I'm kind of thinking of creating a YouTube channel that sort of deals with this.
Pretty cool, huh? And this is a kid that just a few days before didn't think that he had a voice, and now he had a big voice. And Luke is so great. He just graduated, and him and I talk all the time, and he is just amazing, the things that he has done since then. But because of that experience, he had all of this strength and all of this passion to do all of these great things and to have a voice. And so I can't wait to see what Luke does. But Luke's just one of the kids that we have, and all of our kids definitely want us to let them have a voice. So I want you to ask yourself this as we end our day. What would happen if you listened to your students? I asked you that in the beginning. When was the last time that you asked them how they want to learn and what they want to learn? And think about your own learning. How do you feel when you're asked how you want to learn and what you think is important? So our kids' voices, as you see, they have the power to make a difference, and they have the power to change education, and they definitely have the power to change the world. And we're lucky because all of you have the power to be that change too. And so as you start a new year and you've been here today, I hope that some of these stories inspired you just to really let kids have a voice. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for a wonderful, uplifting keynote. I do have a question for you, though, as before we leave. We had a common theme for both of our keynotes, and then a lot of it was about getting connected and getting your teachers or your students a voice and getting them a broader audience. What do you suggest is something that would be a great first step to someone who might be thinking maybe a little overwhelmed and thinking, I can't do that because I don't have the time? What's something that you could offer the...
Do Dot Day this week. Look it up. See how easy it is. When I first started connecting for like Dot Day, I would honestly not even connect outside of my school. I Skyped my kids from my library office into their classrooms because none of us knew how to use Skype. The kids needed to learn what it meant to be connected. I mean, that's part of the connected piece. And so look for things like that, like Dot Day. And also, like on Twitter, if Twitter is kind of an interest to you, we have a great Iowa Ed Chat in Iowa, and it's just IA Ed Chat, which is a great place to get connected to, and there are hundreds of people that will help. So,
Perfect, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the room?
Will you share with us that calendar?
yes, I will. I'm just going to share with you are you on Twitter? Is everybody kind of on Twitter? And maybe I could send this link to you.
Do you want to share it with me? Yep.
Yes.
And then I can send it out.
And I'll tweet it out right now too.
Perfect,
Cool.
thank you.
Is that good? Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. If we could give another round of applause for Shannon McClintock Miller.